Welcome to UrbanWise Podcast. Today we're diving into participatory planning. The idea that citizens, people like you and me, should actually have a real voice in shaping the places where we live.
It sounds pretty fundamental to a healthy city, doesn't it?
Totally. But, well, in this age where trust often feels low and society seems increasingly fragmented, the really big question is, can it still work?
And that tension, that's exactly what a really insightful blog post on the UrbanWise site explores. It's titled, Participatory Planning in the Age of Polarization. Can It Still Work? By Melike Şenkal.
Right, and that piece is our main source for this deep dive. Our mission really is to unpack what it says, to understand what participatory planning actually is.
Why is facing some serious challenges today?
And importantly, how new tools and maybe the different ways of thinking are being used to try and keep it effective, keep it inclusive, even with all this polarization going on.
So maybe we should ask, how can you, listening now, really influence the design and the decisions about the places where you live? That feels like the core question we're exploring here.
Definitely. So let's start with the basics. What is participatory planning at its core?
Well, fundamentally, it's an approach to urban and regional development that tries to bring community members directly into the decision-making process.
Okay, so it's a move away from that classic top-down model, right, where it's just experts or government officials making all the calls.
Exactly. It's all about collaboration.
Yeah.
The idea is planners, policymakers, and the public working together.
Because residents have that crucial lived experience, that local knowledge.
That simply has to inform decisions, whether it's about parks or transport or even how city budgets are spent.
And the source emphasizes it's more than just a process, it's almost a philosophy about empowering people.
Yes, giving a voice to those who are going to be most affected by whatever development happens. The source mentions a whole range of methods.
Like what?
Well, you've got your traditional public meetings, workshops, surveys, but also newer things like online platforms and these intensive workshops called design charrettes.
And the benefits, according to the post, seem pretty significant.
They really can be. It can boost the democratic legitimacy of decisions. For one, build trust, create a sense of ownership.
Kind of bridge that gap we sometimes see between citizens and institutions.
Precisely. And it can promote social justice by trying to directly address inequalities.
But there's a big if here, isn't there?
Yes, a crucial caveat from the source. For it to really work, it absolutely has to be equitable and genuinely inclusive, especially for marginalized communities.
Otherwise, it just becomes tokenism, like ticking a box.
Exactly. It risks being just a performative exercise if that inclusion isn't real.
Which sort of brings us to the crunch point. Why, even though it sounds so important, is participatory planning facing such a test right now?
Well, the source points out that while it should be the backbone of inclusive urban governance, helping with transparency and local ownership, its effectiveness is really being strained.
By what?
By this growing fragmentation in society politically, economically, culturally. It's making collaboration harder.
You can see that playing out, can't you? The source mentions things like public hearings turning really heated or just unproductive.
Online discussions getting derailed by misinformation campaigns.
And that persistent problem of certain groups, often marginalized communities, still being underrepresented, their voices just aren't consistently heard.
It feels like the very spaces designed for finding common ground are sometimes being pulled apart by division.
Yet the need for that genuine connection between people and their local government hasn't gone away. If anything, it's maybe more important.
And this is where new tools and technologies start to come into the picture. They offer potential ways to navigate some of these challenges.
Like digital tools.
Exactly. The source highlights the rise of digital participation platforms. They offer new ways to engage people beyond just the traditional town hall meeting.
Okay, so what kind of platforms are we talking about? Did the source give examples?
It did. It mentioned platforms like Decidim, which started in Barcelona, Consul from Madrid, and another one called Polis, which has been used in places like Taiwan and Canada.
And these aren't just like online suggestion boxes, right? They're more involved.
Oh, definitely not just suggestion boxes. They're designed to be much more interactive. Think transparent forums for actual dialogue, data dashboards so everyone can see the feedback.
And crucially, ways to integrate that citizen input back into government decision-making processes.
Yeah, that link back to actual decisions is key.
Okay, let's dig into those examples a bit more. What about Decidim from Barcelona?
Right, Decidim. The name means we decide in Catalan, which tells you something. It's described as free, open source digital infrastructure built specifically for participatory democracy.
Open source is interesting. So not just for Barcelona.
No, exactly. It started with the Barcelona City Council back in 2016, but it's grown way beyond that. Now it's run by a nonprofit association with a whole global community behind it.
So other cities or even NGOs or universities can use and adapt it.
Precisely. They can use it for all sorts of things:
Hmm.
strategic planning, public consultations, participatory budgeting, you name it. It's designed to be flexible.
And what can it actually do? What are the features?
It's pretty comprehensive, according to the source. It can manage participation processes that happen in multiple phases. It lets citizens launch their own initiatives or proposals.
And then other people can comment and show support.
Yep. There are tools for deliberation, like upvoting or downvoting comments, to surface key points. It has secure e-voting modules, tools for scheduling and documenting meetings.
Accountability tracking sounds important too, seeing what happens to proposals.
Absolutely. Tracking them from idea to actual policy outcomes. Plus, it has the more standard things like surveys and event management tools built in.
The source mentions some usage numbers for Barcelona, right?
It did, and they're quite striking. By 2018, something like 30,000 registered users were involved across 35 different processes.
And that led to actual proposals.
Over 13,000 proposals, yeah. And crucially, over 9,000 of those were linked to actual policy outcomes. So it wasn't just talk.
And there was a big budget round mentioned too.
Yes. The 2019 participatory budget round saw a huge engagement, around 40,000 voters, casting 55,000 votes, and it brought in over 56,000 new users just for that specific initiative.
Wow. That shows the potential scale. What about globally?
Globally, the source estimates over 300 cities and organizations are using Decidim in some form, around 70 known live instances, reaching perhaps 700,000 registered participants worldwide.
Okay, quite a reach. Let's shift to the next one mentioned, Console from Madrid. Similar idea.
Similar in that it's also a free, open-source civic tech platform focused on direct citizen participation. It started life as Decide Madrid, launched by the Madrid City Council in 2015.
And what does it let citizens do? Propose ideas, vote.
Both and more. Citizens can propose policy ideas, others can support them, often needing a certain threshold, like maybe 1% of the population, to move forward. They can debate ideas in forums, vote securely.
Even co-draft laws or decide on budget priorities.
Exactly. And participatory budgeting is a really big application for Console, too.
The source highlighted Madrid's commitment there, didn't it? Something about the budget amount.
Yeah, it's substantial. Madrid apparently allocates $100 million every year through participatory budgeting. Using Console, citizens propose and vote on projects that get funded with that money.
100 million euros a year decided by citizens.
Yep.
That's real power.
It's definitely direct, tangible impact. Console also has features for collaborative lawmaking, like annotating draft legislation and running public consultations, again, designed to be adaptable.
And the usage in Madrid, how many people involved?
By 2022, the source says over 400,000 residents were registered on Decide Madrid. That's a decent chunk of the city's adult population.
And tangible results beyond the budget.
Yeah, they reported implementing projects worth around $360 million in total that originated from citizen proposals on the platform.
And globally. Is Console as widespread as Decidim?
It's up there.
Yeah.
The source suggests around 250 implementations by cities, regions, or other institutions across more than 30 countries, potentially reaching something like 90 million citizens globally.
90 million. These platforms really do have the potential for massive scale.
They certainly show what's possible in terms of reach and adoption.
Okay, the third one mentioned was Polis, used in Taiwan and Canada, among other places. This one sounded a bit different in its approach.
It is quite different, yes. Polis is also open source, but it's a deliberation tool specifically designed to surface consensus. It tries to minimize direct back-and-forth arguments.
How does it do that? People post statements, but no replies.
Exactly. You post a short statement on the topic. Others then simply upvote or downvote your statement. There are no threaded replies, no comment sections in the usual sense.
Why no replies?
The idea is to avoid those echo chambers and flame wars that often happen in online forums. It forces people to engage with the statement itself, not just react to the person posting it or the comments below it.
And the clever part is how it processes those votes, using machine learning.
Right. An algorithm analyzes the patterns of agreement and disagreement. It groups participants based on how they voted across all the statements, not based on demographics or anything else.
So it finds clusters of opinion based purely on voting patterns.
Yes. And then, crucially, it automatically identifies and highlights the statements that achieve broad agreement across those different clusters.
So it actively seeks out the common ground. The source said it was almost like gamifying consensus building.
That's a good way to put it. The key features are these visual conversation maps showing the opinion clusters and the points of agreement, that lack of threaded replies, the simple up-down vote, and the automatic highlighting of consensus statements. Plus, you can export the data.
The Taiwan example sounded particularly interesting, Taiwan.
Yes, Taiwan. It's a national platform in Taiwan, active since 2015 apparently. And they've used Polis a lot for really tricky, contentious issues, things like regulating Uber or policies around artificial intelligence.
It actually helped.
According to the source, yes. It's credited with helping find consensus on over 26 different issues, and remarkably, about 80% of those consensus points led to some form of government action. The source even notes it was still active and working well in 2025. That's a powerful link between finding common ground and actual policy change.
Definitely. Another different example mentioned was the Ontario government in Canada using a Polis survey back in 2018 for a public consultation on anti-racism. So it can be used for gathering diverse input, too.
And the scale for Polis, how many people engage?
It varies a lot depending on the specific project, but Taiwan, over its lifetime, has apparently involved over 200,000 participants. A referendum process in Uruguay using Polis saw about 16,500 people cast almost 300,000 votes on statements. Austria's Klamerat, a citizen assembly on climate, used it with about 5,000 citizens.
So it can handle significant numbers depending on the context.
Yes, it shows these digital tools aren't just for general feedback. They can be tailored for specific, even quite difficult deliberative challenges. And tying back to specific applications, the source really highlighted participatory budgeting as a major success story, often using these kinds of tools.
Absolutely. It started, famously, in Porto Alegre, Brazil, decades ago. But now, the source says it's a global thing used in over 7,000 cities worldwide.
And the examples given really show that power shift. New York City residents getting to vote on how parts of the city budget are spent, on things like parks, schools, street upgrades in their own neighborhoods.
Or Paris, where a significant chunk, 5% of the city's entire investment budget, is decided through public voting. That's serious money being allocated directly based on what citizens prioritize.
And the impacts are positive.
The source says they're well documented. Things like increased civic engagement, especially bringing in younger people or those from lower income groups who might not normally participate. Enhanced transparency in how public money is spent.
And real, tangible improvements in neighborhoods that might have been historically overlooked or underfunded.
Exactly. Those concrete outcomes make participatory budgeting a very compelling example of participation working.
Moving beyond just feedback or voting on budgets, the source also touched on a deeper level of involvement, co-designing projects with communities.
Yeah, this is about shifting from communities just commenting on plans that are already mostly developed to them being involved right from the start, shaping the projects from the ground up.
Using their lived experience to inform the actual design.
Precisely. The source mentions cities like Melbourne, Amsterdam, even Medellin in Colombia, experimenting with this kind of deeper collaboration.
What sort of methods do they use for that?
Things like those design charrettes we mentioned, intensive collaborative design workshops, also pop-up urban labs where ideas can be tested out physically in the city in real time, often temporarily.
And tactical urbanism, quick local projects.
Yes, often driven by local community groups themselves. Quick, low-cost interventions to test ideas or make immediate improvements.
And the big benefit here is getting solutions that are much more sensitive to the local context, more functional, more inclusive.
That's the goal, tapping into that invaluable local knowledge to create better urban environments for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges of polarization, the potential of these digital tools like Decidim, Console, Polis, the success of things like participatory budgeting, and this idea of co-design. How does the source suggest we pull all this together? How can meaningful engagement actually happen in these, well, difficult times?
It synthesizes a few key strategies, really. First, the absolute necessity of building long-term trust, especially with communities that have felt excluded or ignored in the past. That takes time and genuine effort.
Okay, trust is foundational. What else?
Second, diversifying how we engage. Not relying on just one method. It means smartly combining traditional face-to-face interactions with these newer online tools to reach different people effectively.
Makes sense. Meet people where they are.
Third, actively needing to protect these participatory spaces. They can be vulnerable to being politicized or swamped by misinformation. That requires careful design of the process and maybe active moderation.
Guarding the integrity of the space itself.
And finally, and this is crucial, really prioritizing equity throughout the entire process. It's not an add-on. It means designing initiatives from the start to be genuinely inclusive and to actively uplift voices that have historically been marginalized or silenced.
So it's about intentional design for inclusion.
Absolutely. The source concludes by saying, look, participatory planning isn't some magic bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all fix.
But it's still a really powerful tool.
A critically powerful tool, especially now, for strengthening urban democracy. But it only works if it's adapted thoughtfully to the challenges we face today.
Which brings us right back to that core question from the source. Can it still work in this age of polarization?
And the answer seems to be yes, if we see it not just as a planning technique, but as something more fundamental, like a democratic safeguard.
A way to center local voices, distribute power more fairly, make how our cities are run more inclusive and accountable.
Exactly. But the source is very clear. Its success hangs entirely on genuine, sincere implementation, not just paying lip service to participation.
Going beyond tokenism means really tackling the underlying barriers too, right? Like the digital divide, language access.
And acknowledging those histories of marginalization that make trust so hard to build. It means sustained commitment from institutions. It means thoughtful outreach, investing in people's capacity to actually participate effectively.
And ensuring that when people do give their input, it's not just heard, but actually influences decisions. That feedback loop needs to close.
When done well, the source suggests participatory planning really can help communities find that shared value, navigate their differences constructively.
And maybe collectively imagine and build the future of the places they share.
So maybe the final thought for you, our listener, whether you're a resident, a planner, maybe you work in local government, drawing from this deep dive, the critical questions we constantly need to ask are,
How are we engaging people? Whom are we actually reaching? And maybe most importantly, whose voices are missing from this conversation?
And then how can we ensure those missing voices don't just get a seat at the table, but can genuinely shape the decisions being made? All grounded in that core belief that our cities only really work when they truly work for everyone.